Today's video is going to focus on creating this input. So the idea is if we go to the current iteration of the input for Elm, it's very simple, right? It doesn't have the same level of customizability as the React implementation. And because I want to eventually build forms, you'll see that Ant has a form component. The precursor to building forms is, oh wow, that's taking a while, is having a password field. So that's why I want to focus on passwords. There's also a checkbox here, but I actually just published checkbox not too long ago. Unfortunately, it's missing animations, so if anyone out there wants to implement animations, by all means, go for it. There's an issue on the repo already for that. Yeah, so I just want to go back to the input component and just sort of play around with it. So it looks to be just your typical input. So let's see the code. This is always how I start. I just sort of eyeball the code. I eyeball the actual UI. Start getting an idea of how it's been implemented, or at least what the API looks like. Yeah, like for me, something that's really important is the API and what's like the developer experience. So I like to get inspiration from the React implementation and then see how I can ensure that the developer experience stays just as good, if not better. So it looks like you can pass in your own component as well, but that will probably be something that I do sometime later, maybe in this video, we'll see. But yeah, by default, you have this I component that you can toggle. So that's something I'm going to be focusing on. Something interesting about this is that the width on this seems to be divided by half for some strange reason. If I go back here, the original is full width. So I don't understand why it's half the width here. Maybe there's some flexbox or some other CSS being applied here that makes this not the full width. Interestingly enough though, if I go to form, why does this take so long? If I go to the form basic example here, it seems to be full width. Okay. Wow, this is really slow. I am uploading a video or exporting a video from iMovie, so maybe that's causing some issues. I don't know. But yeah, it looks like it's full width relative to your typical input. Or yeah, so I don't know. I guess we'll find out as we go. Maybe there's some reason that will make sense as we start developing. So I'm gonna open up. What am I gonna open up? Input. There we go. And we want to start thinking about the API. So if you look at the exposed functions, we have the actual creator to create an input. Interestingly enough, we haven't emitted input, which I think we should, or emitted. We haven't exposed the input type, which we should. It's an opaque type, so it's always nice to be able to expose this because the consumer of your API might want to create functions that take inputs. By no means does that mean that you can create them, but you can create abstractions on top of input for whatever your needs may be. So I'm going to just fix that real quick. Represents a customizable input. Let's just leave that as it is for now. Okay, and going back to the top, so you can create inputs, you can change the size, or at least there's an API for that, but I don't believe I've actually implemented much logic for that. So there's with size on input. So this is the event. to emit messages with placeholder to HTML. So we're going to need to implement something like withtype, right? I'm going to go back here. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention this before, but if you need an overview of the project itself, so like the package and the showcase project, there's already a video I made. There's actually 2 videos. It's a 2-part series. So go on over and check those out if you want an overview. But if not, you can just follow along here. So going back here, yeah, I was thinking that there might be an API called withtype. And I think there might be a whole bunch of different types. So let's see how they do it. So for example, there's a text area, right? So we could have an API called input with type text area. Interestingly enough, they just have a separate component in React that's not even your input. So that might be something I end up doing as well. But I think right now, oh, I see there's format tooltip input. You can use this input instruction of tooltip component to create a numeric input. Okay. Yeah, I think right now I'm just going to have a very simple API called withtype, and you can specify 2 types of inputs basically. The first one's going to be just text. So input type text. Yeah, I mean, if we look at the input HTML, yeah, see, there's already a text input. So I think this would be kind of like an intuitive way to think about what the withtype API could take. So there's like a submit input. So I think we can implement like a sort of our own custom version of this, but it should be sort of intuitive around what the behavior should be around it. So like by default, we'll have a text input, which will render, oh, there it is, which will render this one. But then we'll also have a password input. Go here. There is a input type called password. Input types. There we go. Yeah. It's a whole bunch. Yeah, so this is pretty intuitive, I would say. So let's see. So alphabetically, PQRST. So yeah, here with type. Cool. So we're going to expose a function called withtype, and what's that going to look like? I'm going to put it right here, arbitrarily, withtype, and we're going to make a custom type in a moment, and I'm going to call it input type. We're going to take our input, our original input, and then we're going to return a modified input. So I'm liking this so far. Input type, yep. And then we're going to follow this pattern along as we do above and below. So yeah, I'm destructuring the input. So if I go to the definition of this, you can see that the definition of the input type has the value constructor for input, and then a custom type called input ops, which is a record, as you can see here. And then potentially it emits a message. That's why it's a maybe. So by default, they don't emit messages. Let's see if we can see that there. Yeah, right there. Okay, so with type, let's go back here. Okay. So, I mean, this is pretty straightforward here so far. Type? Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to have a new field on the sort of input options that I showed above called type underscore. We can't use type because it's a reserved word in Elm. So I'm just gonna do type underscore, which is a pattern I've already used. Okay, so this is simply going to take the input type that this function takes as the first argument, and that's how we're going to have a new updated input value. By the way, there's a very nice person in the Elm community. I think his name's Brian Hicks, and he made a great talk about making APIs. Elm API, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, this one. So this talk has inspired the API that you see here. The talk that I show here, it basically goes into this idea of creating a with star pattern. So like he talks about with star in one of his slides. And so here you can see I'm doing that already for most of my modifier functions, whatever you want to call them, where you take some data structure, such as this one, and then it returns a modified version of that data structure based on some option. And the reason this API is really nice is because you can do chaining. So if I go to input, what's a good example? I think checkbox has a lot of chaining in here going on. There you go, see, with onCheck, with label, with disabled, and then I render it. It's really nice because you can do all this, these pipelines. You can chain these pipelines together and create, specifically what kind of, any kind of component that you want with a nice API. Yeah, so I highly recommend that, and that's kind of the impetus for the design here. And so the last thing that we do here, going back into the creation of this withtype API, is you simply rebuild it. Okay, so I destructured it with the old options, and then I created a updated record, and then I return a new option type. So now we're getting some errors here because Elm can't find the definition. So let's go ahead and make that input size. I guess right here we can do that. Yeah, type input type. And I think for now we're going to only have two types. But again, like I mentioned already, there's already like this native, there's like a spec already around the type for an input. And so I want to loosely adhere to this. But most importantly, I just sort of want to, yeah, like make this API as intuitive as possible. Like if you know HTML and you've used an input element with type, you should already have a general idea of what I'm implying here, or like what this API implies. But yeah, for now, we're just gonna only have two sort of values for input type. But yeah, in the future, we might be able to, or we might do more. So we have text and password. Okay. Now we need to specify the type field. Okay. And then now we're getting a compiler error because I have this default input options value that doesn't have a type. But we're going to use, whoops, text here. There we go. All right, now we have a warning because password's not being used, but we will in a second. Yeah, I'm just trying to think for a second here. I want to go back to the input definition and see how they use it. So yeah, this is really interesting. I'm seeing that there's a few different exposed React components that aren't input. So if you go to here, oh, whoopsies. There is an input component, but then inside the input module, there seems to be other components, which I don't really see why I'd want to do that, at least not for password. Like I see kind of a justification for text area, maybe, to have a completely dedicated component. But here I would have imagined that you could just simply have like an attribute on this component or a prop that just says, this is a type password or something. But I don't know. For now, I like my API better. I think my design's simpler. With type, so password, and we're gonna have to expose input type now. So let's just put that here. Input type. Well, maybe it should go here. There we go. Oh, what happened? Okay, so, still not being exposed. There we go. So now I've exposed both the type and the values of that type. All right, moving on. So we have the with type. I guess that's pretty much it at this point. Now we have to see how we would use this option. So every component in this package, in this Elm-Anti package, has this exact pattern where you have a dedicated type for the component. So in this case, there's an input type, and you go about customizing the type or the whatever you want to call it, the value, the component, as you wish, right? So like for example, with input, I could customize it with a placeholder. I could now make it a password field or password input, or I could change the size. I could emit events or messages, right? But notice that this isn't an HTML message, right? And if you want to render something onto the DOM or onto a view in Elm, it needs to be an HTML message. So every component has this pattern where once you're done customizing it, you want to convert it into an HTML message. So if you go back here, you'll see, for example, checkbox as an HTML, a to-HTML function. And in here is where we're going to create logic, or our first set of logic, in order to distinguish between your text input and your password input. So, I mean, the first thing I'm going to do, let's think about it for a second. Obviously, if you're typing a password, you want to not show the characters. That would kind of defeat the main purpose of a password input. So let's do that. Type attribute. Let's do that. Let's create a variable called type attribute. And I'm going to do a case statement here. So input ops of text. And then here, let's see what I'm using this class, input class. Okay, so I don't think I've exposed the attributes. Yeah, okay. I think there is already a type, but so okay, sorry, I'm not really conveying my thoughts well. What I'm thinking right now is there is a type underscore attribute to specify the type of a element, but we already have this type field here, right? And I don't want to like conflict them. It's not clear. So I'm going to do a alias here for the attributes module. Just do attr, and then I'm going to just remove that. Okay, so back down here. Now I can do attr type, and then I can do text, and then there's password, right? So I can do attr type password. Great. All right, what's going on here? Oh, haha. Okay, so it's not being used. Cool. There we go. And I want to. Should I do some indentation here? Class, input class. I don't like how this looks. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna do some cleanup. Wait. There we go. Okay. I like this a bit better. Do I need to surround this? I guess I still need to surround this in parentheses. There we go. So one thing has changed now. We're rendering. So yeah, let me quickly cover this. So yeah, we're rendering an input, just a regular HTML input value. There's some optional attributes. So for example, right now there's only one, which is the message emission logic. So by default, again, inputs don't emit any messages, but they can if you want them to. And this is how I'm dealing with that. So I'm applying the optional attributes, and then I'm applying some attributes that I always need to apply to this input. The first one is the class, because I need to style it. I'll cover styling in a second because we're going to have to do some CSS in a moment. But that lives in a different file. And then there's a placeholder, so there may or may not be a placeholder. And then there's now the type. So if we go to localhost, let me close this, and I go to input, no, go here, definitely want to close that. Nothing's broken, so that's good. Yeah, I've gone ahead and done a bit of cleanup with Webpack. Gotta love Webpack. And some setup. So let me walk you through the set that I did, so you have some context. So if we go to I think password example. So yeah, so I set up the actual demo. Okay, it's not done at all. It's deceiving, but yeah. Actually, let me clear the cache. Oh, we have an interesting bug here because I'm clicking here, but it's not showing the source code. So that's something I can look into later. Actually, I have an idea of what it might be. In fact, maybe we can set that up now. But this is the code that we're seeing here. And if I go to the input component page that is managing these examples, you can see I've done some modifications. So you can see the plus to the left of the line number means I've just added a new line, or for example here I've done some modifications to these existing lines. So there you can kind of get an idea of what I've done so far. And I'll push sort of like a few commits. So if you look at the project, eventually you'll see commits that align with this video. Yeah, you'll see eventually commits that sort of align with what I've done. And I can maybe follow up as well in the video description with like commits that demonstrate all this work. But you can see here that I've like added this password example with like the state necessary. There's like the file name that I need in order to read from the file system, stuff like that. There's some refactoring I had to do here. And I know there's one thing missing. Where is it? Example source code loaded. There we go. That's the culprit. So let's do password example equals, well, let's just copy this and go here and paste that. And then example source code model dot password example. There we go. So now that should render. Oh. Right. Hee hee. There we go. So now if I click here, boom. So now the example will be in sync with, let me close this. It'll be in sync with what we write here. Cool. I'm going to go back to input so that we remember what we have here, right? So we have the input type, type and its corresponding values are being exposed. We have the withtype function now that changes the type field on the options record to be of type text or password. That's a user supplied thing, right? So like if we were to add some documentation here in this function, which Elm will make me do anyways, change the type of the input. So if I add an example, input, I can do that with type input.password. There we go, that's an example. So you can see how I'm imagining this gets used. Yeah. Okay. And actually, yeah, you can already see that in use, right? So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to style this. One of the things that we need to do is add that little eye icon, right? This is actually going to require a pretty big refactor because what I've done so far is I've done sort of like a naive implementation initially where this box that you're seeing here is the actual input. But if you were to look at the markup of how this works, and I also had like another example here that I looked up, the way that this is working is that you have sort of like a div, a containing div that holds two elements. One of the elements is the actual input, and then the other one is a span that contains an SVG. Right, so I'm going to have to do some refactoring in order to allow for, both the simple case, such as this one, or the more complex case. I wonder what this looks like when you have overflow. So overflow just becomes scrollable. Yeah, it's scrollable overflow. Cool. All right, so let's begin. So if you go down to the to HTML function here, this is where the restructuring is going to happen. So you can see, as I mentioned, I have this sort of naive implementation, but that's going to have to change. So I think what we can do is we can have sort of like these utility functions that handle the markup depending on the type of the input, right? So we can do something like view simple input, which takes your input message and returns HTML message. Does that make sense? I think what could happen as well is you could maybe have the logic live here, and yeah, you know what? Let's do something a bit more naive for now, a little bit simpler for now, and then we can refactor as we need to as we go. So I'm gonna do case. Well, I don't know why I would copy. I wouldn't just move this. Let me just move that here. Line 136. I'm gonna fix the formatting. There we go. All right. So I'm gonna want to move all of this, I think, inside of the text field for now. And then I can do this attr type text. And then let's just get rid of this. And then I can just highlight this and then move it below line 135. Let's fix the spacing here. Boom. Okay. And then I'm just going to have a dummy value for now. So let's well, I guess we can think about the structure already. So we can say it's a div because inputs by default live on their own line. I want to say display block. Let's see, display inline block. Okay, so we'll do an inline block change here later on, I guess. Actually, something else I'm curious about. Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, so div that. Okay, and then let's put this in its own line. Let's cut that, paste it here. Beautiful. Okay. There we go. Oh, wait, what am I doing? You can't have an attribute of type password on a div. That's silly. That is just silly. So one of the things. Oh, okay. I'm getting some ideas now. Oh. So I think we have a good API for disambiguating between text and text and password inputs. I created this function that, given an input type, will return attributes that will be applied to the actual input HTML element. So if I go here and do something like, well, let's see what I called the list. So here you see I have a list called input type attributes. So I'm going to declare a variable now called input type attributes, and I'm going to call that function. So create input type attributes, and I'm going to take that input ops dot type. Okay, so there we go. And something else you may have already noticed is that one of the things I apply for text input type is this class called input root class. And what I'm thinking is that the input root class will contain all the styles that we will use to make, well, let's see, yeah, I guess here, it'll contain all the styles to make the input look like this, regardless of whether we're rendering a regular input or a password input like this one. Okay, so you'll also see that at the bottom here, I'm doing exactly the same thing. So I'm applying the input root class to the container when we have a password input. And that way, again, if you have an input of type password, there will be a div that contains an input, but that div will have the same CSS applied as just a simple basic input. Yeah, so let me just double check and see where we're getting compilation errors. Okay, I see. So I don't understand why there's a duplicate error. It's interesting. But anyways, yeah, that makes total sense. I haven't actually declared or exported that value. So let me go here and just copy it. Here we go, and we're going to go to common. So there's a common file in the CSS folder that contains all these different CSS identifiers. So I'm going to paste here, input root class. I'm also going to go and find this here and just declare the class here, string, and let's see, input. Okay, so I can do input class root. There we go. Oh, I feel a sneeze coming. Crisis averted, I think. Okay, input root class, and if we go up here, that's exported. That should have been resolved. Does not expose input root class. I mean, yes, it does. There we go. What's happening here? Why does, let's see, is attribute exposed here? Okay. So I just imported attribute from the wrong namespace. Cool. All right. Type attribute. Don't need that anymore. There we go. Okay, so then now there's two classes that are going to be applied. Oh, hold on a second. Input type attributes. Too many arguments. Well, all attributes equals there we go. Okay. So what I was saying before was that there's two classes that are being shared now, or passed around, I guess. The first one is this input root class, which we put at like sort of like the root node of our input, and then there's also the input class, which gets applied specifically to the actual input HTML element, and so we will then use these two classes to apply styles. I think that's basically it. There shouldn't be any more compilation issues. There we go. So things shouldn't look very different. They still need a bit of work. There we go. But generally speaking, things are still working pretty good. But yeah, now we can go on to actually styling. So I'm going to close some things, I think. I think we're fine. Okay. Actually, I'm going to close this file. Common. Okay. So something we just did was define this new class. So let's import it here. So input root class. There we go. And I just want to try what happens when we simply swap out these classes. So let me just duplicate these lines and then comment one out. And then I want to just do input root class here. What are the outcomes or what's going to happen here? Oh, ho, ho, would you look at that? Would you look at that? That's pretty neat. So, oh, but hold on a second. So something that might be a bit tricky to implement with a shared sort of DOM structure and shared component and shared CSS is that the active state requires this box shadow effect, but that box shadow effect is triggered when you click on the input. So I'm wondering, can I create a selector for the div. What's that gonna look like? Like, I don't want to interfere with what's already been implemented here. Like, it would be something like, let's create a space here, and then we would do create selector. Let me import that from here. And our selector would be something like, hold on a second. So it's going to be a div, right? So we're going to have a div. So, it'll be div dot input root class input root. There we go. All right. So a div with this class whose child is, yeah, but you can't select a parent based on a child. I ran into this issue already. So I think I might need to create a class. Well, I think we're gonna need to take advantage of this file called Elm.int extras, because I'm realizing that there is no such thing, like there's no support really for parent selectors, right? And that's kind of what I need, right? Because if you look at what's happening here is you have an input element and you have a span and then you have a containing div that contains both of those things. And the box shadow state, like the sort of active pseudo state for the div, is being applied based on what's happening to a child. And if you go back here, you know, we learn really quickly that we can't really do this in CSS. Now, there's basically two options at this point. The first is to stay in the world of Elm and to emit a message, right? So, you know, we would have an input Elm element that, like, anytime you click on it, it would emit a message. And when you emit a message, we would then modify some property on the actual containing div. But that then requires wiring it up to your model and your update function, and it just becomes quite involved, which is okay. But I'm trying, you know, like for me, one of the important sort of principles for this library that I am creating is ease of use and sort of this idea of like it being plug and play. And to have sort of visual behavior be dependent upon wiring your component to, you know, to your update function and your model and all that stuff, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. So I think it makes a lot more sense to escape, use kind of like an escape hatch, um, and implement this behavior in JavaScript. So I think that's what we're going to do. We're almost there. So what do I need to do here? Let's do. Man, I need to eventually refactor this, but we're not going to bother with that right now. Let's just do that. Okay, so inputs. Okay. Yeah. And what we're going to want to select is any div that has the style that we mentioned. So if we go to common, it's going to be this. So I wish there was a way to get this class in JavaScript. Okay, whatever. So Elm.Anti, right? And then underscore underscore input dash dash root or dash root. Okay, sure. Let me see what I've used in other places. Yeah, it's consistent. All right, so all divs with element or Elm.Anti input root are going to be selected. So these represent your inputs that are wrapping an actual input element. Okay. And what we're going to do is, actually, so I don't want an event listener, do I? There we go. Yeah. So I guess I do want an event listener. Let's see. Click. Active. What do I want? Type. Event type. Event type. Resource. Focus. Focus in. Focus out. Am I gonna want? I guess focus also. Yeah, focus is one of the things we need. An element has received focus. Okay, WebSocket session. Oh, and I think we're going to have to remove, so we're going to have to listen for focus and blur. So let's just write that down. Need, oh, need to listen for focus, blur, blug. I think focus in and focus out are better. Focus in. I think these are better. But I thought it might be like an active state. Active. Click. Okay, well, I think, wow, there's a lot of events. I think for now, we can just focus on these. No pun intended. Yeah, let's just focus on these two events. So for focus in, we're going to add a class, and for focus out, we're going to remove a class. So we're going to do the same pattern as above. inputs dot for each btn btn funny. Let's scroll up a little bit. There we go. So maybe not too much. So let me see what's happening here. So there's animated before class name. Okay. Yeah, same pattern basically. So, So the thing is that I need to select the parent, right? So I need the corresponding parent for these divs or inputs. Um, hmm. Damn. Sweet. Okay, so here we go. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so we have the parent div. So what we're gonna do is focus in. We're gonna say parent div dot add. Wow, my JS is rusty. So add class. I think I'm only going to support modern browsers for now. Okay. Parent div dot class list dot add active. But I definitely want to prefix this with Elm stuff. So let's do that. Let's also use these bad boys. Nope. did not mean to do that either. Okay. So we can now prefix here. Let's say input active. Input root active. Should I just say input root active? Does it matter? I don't think right now that matters, since I'm only targeting these wrapped inputs anyways. Okay. Let me see. So there's no dot selector, so I'm assuming that remove is the same. Yeah, it's the same. Cool. Let's also generalize this. So active input class. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay. Now, I don't remember how this gets added to the project, so let's see. I think it might actually be in Webpack. There we go. So that might already be loaded because of Webpack. Let's see what the sources are. Well, there's only one. Oh, wait, there we go. Right. Okay, cool. Can I confirm? So the way I can confirm this is by maybe checking out focus in. Focus in. Focus in. There we go. Yeah, it's there. Cool. So hypothetically, if I select here, right? Oh, look at that. Would you look at that? Look at them apples. Them apples are looking good. Okay, cool. One limitation right now with this file is that it only gets, it only binds event handlers on sort of like a first render. So let me show an example. If I go to here and I go to button, let me refresh it. Okay, so I've refreshed the page, which means that this file just ran. And so I can click on these buttons, right? It's all good. But if let's suppose that a user lands on this page, and I go to button now, and I go to click here, those animations don't appear, and the reason is because we've just moved to a new page. So what you would need to do is trigger a port message to this file to trigger it to basically run every single time that a user switches pages. I think that's a concern for some other day, but something to keep in mind if you're playing around and you don't see this animation occurring. But alas, here we are, and things are looking good. So now I just need to copy that code here. So let's see. Input active. Input root active class. Input root active class. There we go. It's equal to that's what I did, right? Yeah. There we go. Okay. Okay. We're in the input CSS file, and we're getting pretty close, right? So now we have a different DOM structure depending on whether we have a text input or a password input. And just to make sure before we continue moving on, let's double check and see that the class on the root node is being dynamically applied when I enter into the input. There we go. If I leave, the input is also, or the class is also removed. Great. I'm also wondering, did we have a, what's it called? A hover effect that was similar? No, it's only when it's active. So if I click away, it blows my mind how slow this website is. Like, there we go. So only active. The box shadow does not appear unless I click into that. So we've added a class that can do that, or we can style and add styles too. So that's good. If I head over, where am I? Oh, clicking all the wrong things. Okay, so something we're going to want to do is make selectors for the two instances, right? So we're going to make a selector that applies styles only to the simple example. So we're going to say if you have an input element with the root node class, then do something. or if you have a div with that root node class, then apply the exact same style. So we're going to share styles between two different structures. So let's see. We have the input root class that's already applying, what's it called? The hover state. Okay. And the next thing I want to do is see how I can share these two. So the actual box shadow effect. Gonna need to think for a second here. Active border color. Yeah, so there's a CSS transition here for box shadow. I'm surprised that box shadow doesn't appear in a different place. Like we have a transition pseudo selector or specifying transitions for a particular property, but then that property doesn't appear elsewhere. We have border color, but then we're not. Oh, there we go. Box shadow 5. Oh, I was doing an exact match when I was doing a search. Yeah, box shadow. Okay, that makes sense. So that's on focus, and then there's a CSS transition there. Okay, so that needs to be shared in both cases. But yeah, so right now, we can't apply a focus on a div. There's no such thing as that, right? So what's this going to look like? I just want to try something out. So let's see here. I'm going to reopen my, what's it called? Elm Extras file. And remember, trying to recall what the selector was. Okay. And go here. Yeah, input root active class. Okay. There we go. Okay. So we're going to say input root active class. Also, this selector doesn't make sense because this function only works for classes. It's appending a period for a class selector, so we're going to want to change that. Let's simply use the Elm CSS function selector, right? Okay, so selector, we're selecting a div with a class input root active class, right? Because when I click here, yeah, we get that class. And just for the sake of getting things moving, I'm going to copy some code here as we see on line 47, I guess. So there's the focus, and then, oh, actually, haha, it's a lot easier than that. I don't even need to apply a focus property here. I'm simply going to say box shadow 5. In fact, let me just copy this. There we go. So if I refresh, let's just make sure things are running. Great. Hey, there we go. This is running so slow. Wonder what's going on. It's not even the Ant design page, it's something else. Well, I'm just gonna hope that things improve. Fingers crossed. Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much running. Okay, so we have the effect here. Is it working as expected? I mean, besides the slowness, let's see if I close Chrome. It's fine. Oh, I see. So the border also needs to stay darker. So I do need to apply this border color effect as well. Outline none. What's outline again? Set all the element properties in single declaration. I think I'm okay for now. Yeah, I'm totally blanking out on outline. Okay. So we have box shadow, border color. So let me copy that as well. There we go. This should refresh momentarily. There we go. Okay. It's looking good. This is awesome. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to remove the default border for the input. So we're gonna have a let's make some comments here that say, oh, these are styles for wrapped inputs, i.e. password input whose root node. Oh, wow, language server timed out. I've never seen that. Whose root node is a div. Well, let's hope that the Elm language server keeps working. I've never seen that before, but it might be related to the performance issues I'm seeing. Okay, cool. So we also need a style here specifically for, let's do this again. So we're going to select divs whose class is input root class. Input root class. I don't really care if it's active or not. And actually, sorry, we got to continue this, and we got to say input type. Actually, I think we're fine with just that. Type text. I think we're good. Okay. So we're going to select the inputs based on this parent, right? So if it's a wrapped input, we want to say border none. All right, let's see if, oh, haha, select. First argument border is not what I expected. Border 0. There we go. Well, things are slow today. Oh my gosh, look at that. So nice. Okay, things are really starting to take shape here. If we look at the I input, or sorry, the password input, um, it looks like the actual like box for the input element stretches quite wide. So that's something we're also going to want to fix. Let's see here. Can I do a active? Yeah, I can do an active selector, I believe. And I'm going to say border 0 again, because it appears again when the element is active. So let that refresh. Why did that occur? Let's zoom in on this. So we have a selector here. So yeah, that's fine. Now, what happens if I apply the active style? So, oh, interesting. It will focus. That's kind of a counterintuitive because, like, intuitively, I feel like when I click on this input that it's active right now. Does that align the same? Well, we can fix that in a bit. But okay, sure. Let's simply add another field here. Focus, border 0 again. Okay. I'm so bummed about the speed right now. Feedback loop is slow. You know what? I'm actually going to restart my computer, so give me a sec. Okay. So things seem to be a little bit snappier now. I've closed some programs, restarted my whole computer. So that should be a lot better now. Yeah, so we have the foundation of what we're looking for. Although, hey, what's going on here? What happened? What if I do a hard refresh? Huh, there was maybe some caching going on. Oh, huh. No, it's again that issue I mentioned earlier where um, this code doesn't run on a sort of like page by page basis. It only runs once. So if I land here, this code is already run, and the code hasn't found any inputs or buttons to bind these event listeners to. So then when I transition to here, that's why. Um, so I have some ideas. I probably will need to implement some sort of DOM mutation observer um, to see or listen for changes in the DOM that the Elm engine will make, and then rerun this as needed. Yeah, that's sort of the vision I'm seeing there. Okay, but we're here, and interestingly, the border still appears. So let me see what's going on here. All right, so if I apply an active style to the input or focus. Oh, the JS doesn't run. Okay. Let me go here. So border 0, active border 0. Is it outline? I see. Okay, so that's what outline was. um, let's try that again. Beautiful. Something that needs to change. Let me see. It looks like the padding is consistent. You have consistent padding. Let me look at the actual implementation here for input. There we go. Is the padding, yeah, the padding looks fine here. Padding is fine here too. Okay. Although, so it looks to me like the height is slightly different on this. Yeah, it looks like there's a slight elevation of the password input. I wish I could see what was going on or apply like a ruler. Is there no way to see like a grid? Chrome inspector grid. Let's see. Okay, well, I won't worry about that for now. But let me go back here to the password input and let me see. Okay, so they are the little bullets are black. I thought they might be kind of like off black. They are spaced a little bit more. There's a bit more spacing between these. So I'm wondering if I can apply spacing to those. What did I do here? Okay. Password. CSS. What is that? Font. Font spacing. Sure. Oh, letter spacing. Okay. So I think I might need to apply letter spacing to the password input. Input. So let's see. Style. Letter spacing. And then I can do a pixel-based letter spacing. So I don't know. Let's say 3px for now. Whoa. That's funny. Okay, that looks good. What about here? I guess the spacing seems to only apply if there's content. Interesting. So CSS selector non-empty attribute. Okay, sure. No. Non-empty input. Okay. Grease monkey. How old is this? 7 years ago. Um, is there a way to do this? Hmm. No, this is not what I want. Do I care about that right now? I could do further tweaks in the future, I suppose. But yeah, let's focus on the important things. Hmm. Yeah, I'll focus on letter spacing in the future. But one thing that is already kind of annoying is, or not sort of on par with the Ant implementation is we don't have a full width input here. So let's do that. In fact, I'm actually going to play around with this here first. So let's say I make input, or what am I saying, width, what should this be, 80% of the parent? Okay, maybe even more, I guess. Yeah, 90. 90 seems good. Maybe even go as far as 93. Oh, okay. Hold on a second. So what happens if the width changes? I might want to float this. Well, no, it's still looking okay. I don't know if applying the width to the input makes the most sense. Well, let's do that for now. So I don't know why my Chrome isn't full width. Oh, yeah. Haha. Just did that. Okay, so border. All right. Width percent 90. Let's go back here. Okay. This is starting to look really good. And I'm starting to realize something. I'm starting to think that we may not even be able to share like we might not even be able to have the same element or the same shared sort of component because this component is always interactive, right? So like you're gonna be toggling this icon, and that means it's always gonna emit a message. Whereas, um, or rather, I should say, this input is always gonna emit a message that is defined inside of this component. But this one is only gonna emit messages that are user supplied. So you could imagine that if we go to input.elm, we might have something like type password input message is equal to um, pass password visibility toggled. Right? So every time you would click this, the password visibility would be toggled. And so that would mean that we have to emit this message, right, from our password input. And I wouldn't want to impose that sort of design upon this because it doesn't make sense. Like this isn't a password input. Um, so I'm starting to think that I might want to refactor this into its own component now. Um, Unfortunately, but I think there's still a lot that can be shared. So we have these classes. Why am I slowly scrolling like this? We still have these CSS classes. So I think the CSS can be shared still. Like there's, we didn't lose, or sorry, like the work wasn't for nothing. I think a lot of, the exploration has been very fruitful and helpful. However, now I'm realizing, oh, okay, this thing needs to emit a message, and I wouldn't want to impose that sort of message emission design upon this one. Like when you import this, you look at the example, it's very easy. You have your user supplied message, and that's the message that this input would emit. But it's going to be a little bit different, I think, now with this. Right now, it's only emitting a user supplied message, but yeah, like I keep saying, there's going to be a little bit more required to wire this up for a user, including an update function, unfortunately, but that's okay. So before I continue moving in that direction, I think it might just be nice to like finish the design up. One thing I'm noticing is that text selection isn't being applied yet. So if I select this text, I should be able to see that blue highlighting. So there's a common font styles list of styles that I'm going to apply. So let's see, where is this? Yeah, okay. So the input root class is being applied to both an input element and a div. And that's why we're not seeing the text selection here. So, even though we have text selection, so if I go here and I go to, what is it? Yeah, common font styles here. You'll see that I have the font family and the text selection styles defined here. But yeah, like I'm applying them to a div in the case of the password. So I need to change this up a little bit. Let's see what this might look like. I think I'm going to need to apply a selector for, so like this. Let's see. We're going to say cg.selector, and we're going to have an input with the class input root class. Yeah, and we're also going to select an additional or like have an additional selector. So let me go here, let me find Elm CSS and see if there's like a global selector to append another style to. Because basically what I want to do is I want to say this, comma, right? And then I want to apply an entirely different selector. So I want to say div well, div dot. I don't know why I chose to do that pattern. This should simplify things a bit. Yeah. Div dot input root class. Right, so in both cases now, I'm selecting an input. And then I can say input styles. And this, I might just be able to comment out. You know what, for now, let me simply put an empty list here. Okay, so that should be compiling. And let's see. So we do have the text selection styles being applied, but Something went horribly wrong. Um, what did I do here? Hmm. Let's see. Background color. Interesting. Background color, for some strange reason, is blue. Hmm. Oh, selection. Hmm. Hmm. This doesn't seem to be applying correctly. It's only applying in the case of um, sort of like the last selector, not the first. So is this a bug? Maybe. Could also be user error. Um, so I think what I can do is split it up. I think that would be okay. And simplify things. So we're going to say uh, instead of having this here, we're going to say, okay, this. We're going to come here and we're going to do cg.selector. And I'm going to grab, so let's see, input class. I'm going to grab all this here. Oh, a bit too much. What did I do? All this. Whoops. So we're going to just have two different selectors. I think that's okay. So nothing broke here. Although things seem to have broken here. So let me see what happens if I comment that out. Okay. Hmm. Okay. This is very odd. I don't understand why the div suddenly lost all of its styles. So for a moment right now, I'm going to go back in time. I see. So I think what I need to do, I think I understand. I think what I need to do is I need to split up the input styles, this definition here, because this CSS currently assumes a particular DOM structure. But basically what I need is I need sort of like root node styles being one thing, and then I need input styles being another thing. So I need to just move things around. So for example, um, what's it called? Uh, everything to do with the actual input needs to have some styles, and then everything to do with like the actual border and again the root, what I'm calling the root node, needs to be a different set of styles. So um, let's see here. Common font styles are going to stay for the input style. Color is also going to stay. Border, right? So border needs to move, I believe. Don't think that makes sense for the actual input because the input, well, the input will have a border here. Let's see. Hmm. Oh no, that's fine. That makes sense. Yeah. So border width, border radius. Let's just grab this stuff. There we go. Width and height will also move here. Okay. Border style solid, again, 39. Background color. All right, do I want background color on the root? Yes. Border color also. Let's see, carrot color. Property carrot color. I forget what this is about. Oh, that stays on the input. Padding, that would stay, that would move. So let's move this to line 42. Focus, that stays on the input. Although, okay, let's see here. So, I think we're going to need to add some custom styles for the simple case, for the simple input, because you don't want to apply these, a border color and a box shadow and like outline none to this example, but you do for this one. So I can move all of this to here. So we're going to have selector. Let me comment that out and do CG selector input period input root class. Yeah. So we're going to say, what is it, root node styles plus input styles plus custom styles, which are going to be these. Border color, box shadow, outline, none. Let's move that here. Yeah. There we go. Let's fix this up. And let's surround this with parentheses. So an input will have the root node styles, the actual input styles, and this focus code, which I think I'm going to have to extrapolate outside of, like, these two things are going to need to be extrapolated, I believe, because, yeah, I can see that already here. Yeah. So I'm going to need to do some cleanup afterward to remove duplication, but that's fine for now. All right, so let's go over here and see what else. Oh, whoops, shouldn't have done that. See what else needs to be moved around. Hover. So when I hover over the input, border color needs to change. So that should move here to the root node styles 43. So let's also make, so let's see, box shadow here. So div with input root active class. Okay, we're going to do CG selector. By the way, CG is the CSS, global CSS. So selector div input root class, and let me also fix that up here. A lot simpler. Okay, so this is going to take root node styles. Sure, let's just get rid of this for now. Okay. Where are we? So we have the CSS transition, which is, that might also need to, yeah, I think that might also need to change now. Yeah, there's no transition here, but there's a transition here. That's fine. Okay, let's see. Kind of lost my train of thought, if I'll be honest. I see. So the transition needs to be applied separately. So let's do, I don't know, focus transition styles equals this, and we're going to move this here to line 50 and do some cleanup here. There we go. Okay, there we go. So for the input style, in this case, we're going to apply here focus transition styles here, and also here. So input root active class focus transition styles. Oh, okay. Oh, there's already. Okay, no, never mind. Maybe this shouldn't be a list. Yeah, okay. And best way to do this, I guess, here. There we go. Okay, and then when, yep, okay, so when it's active, when the password input is active, we also apply these styles. So let's do that. Great. So now we have things looking pretty consistent. That's fine. What about overflow? Oh, text selection. So text selection is another one, right? Common font styles need to be applied separately here. So let's see. Right now, oh, there we go. So right now, it would need to go here. So let's do common font styles go here. And here we can do we need to wrap this in parentheses. And let's remove common font styles from here. There we go. Nice. Okay. This isn't the prettiest code I've ever written, but it works. All right, so let's keep going here. I think that we're pretty close, but this doesn't make sense to me right now. Border color changes to the primary color when the input is active. In fact, I don't even know if that's being applied. Like, what happens if I just remove this? Does anything change? Doesn't look like it. No, I don't think that was being applied at all. So I think we've landed at sort of a minimal viable product here that works from a styling perspective. Again, not the prettiest thing. Please don't judge me. But it does get the job done. And it works in both cases. Some crazy CSS mangling happening here. And if folks have some suggestions on making this better, I would very much appreciate it. But yeah, it works for now. Let me see. Is there anything else I'd want to change? I think for now I'm okay. I'm happy. Oh, there we go. There's one thing. There's a transition that's not being applied here. So let's see, box shadow border color. Interesting, border color, or sorry, the box shadow transition does get applied, but the border color doesn't. Why would that be? Focus transition styles. So let's see. It's being applied to the input there, but I need to apply to the div. Yeah, so it's being applied there, and we have border color. Interesting. It was working before. Box shadow. Hmm. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to investigate that later on. Kind of want to continue along our path here. So the next thing I want to do is actually swap out this I for like the I text for an actual I icon. So let's head over to icons and let me see if I can find the name of the icon here. I invisible outlined, I two-tone. Let me go here and search the icons for the React implementation. Oh, icon. There we go. I. Okay. Right. So that seems to be the icons that they're using. Let me just double check. Password. Okay. Yeah, that looks like it. And then there's the two-tone. So I'm trying to understand, when does this turn blue? So we have to be active, and then it stays. Okay, well, let's see if I even have that input. I two-tone. Look at that. I filled, visible outlined. Great. I have all of the I icons. Awesome. So let's close this for now. Let's go to the input and let's add the I here. So let's close this for now. And we're going to do import ant dot icons exposing. You know what? I'm going to just call this icons. Yeah. And then I'm going to find the name again. So let's just do I two-tone for starters. Oh. I thought there was a to HTML. Oh, there is. I guess I didn't type it right. Let me close that. Okay. This might look really bad. Or not. There we go. That was a very straightforward addition. Okay. Now I need to position it a little bit better. So let's see what the API is of this because I totally forget. Let's go to the bottom here and scroll all the way down. My God. Okay, a nicer way to do this would be to just find the matching thing. Okay, there we go. So we have list of styles we can apply. Okay. There's size, dimensions. Okay. No styles being applied. Sure. Create view box value. Okay, sure. All right, let's try this out. So I'm going to apply some styles. Styles. How do I add styles? Default config, create view box, generate SVG styles. Do I not have a API for that? Oh, with styles, there we go. Icon with styles. Great. So let's try it out. Whoops. All right, it takes a list of styles that we applied to the icon. So I'm going to say, just to test things out, I'm going to say margin top 10px, and let's see if that works. Sweet, it does work. Although it did move everything else with it, unfortunately. Okay, so I'm going to just want to position it instead of actually modify. So let's see, where's it? Margin top. All right, let's not do that. Let's do position relative and then say top, what, 5px? 5px. 4px. Looks like 3px is the right thing to do. So let's do position relative, and then the next style would be top. How many pixels? 3px. 3px. Okay, cool. Anything else? Let's see. I want to. Okay, yeah, this thing has to be a lot closer to the edge here. I'm trying to think what would be the best way to achieve this. Is increasing the width on this the easiest thing? So if I do width 95, what does this look like when the input is smaller? That's what I feared. What's that CSS property for break, line breaks, CSS line break? How to line break from CSS. Prevent line break. Oh, wrap. You can apply the white space, no wrap. White space, no wrap. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Maybe here. Does it always stay? Okay, I'm happy with this. I mean, like, why would you make such a small input in the first place? Like, this looks decent, in my opinion. I'm going to make the width a little bit less intense, I think. I might also need to do media queries or something. No, a media query wouldn't make sense. I'm still trying to like juggle in my head how to get this eye icon to stay. Well, I guess I could do float. I could float it and make it stay always there. Let's see. Seems to be a bit too much padding here on the right. So let's say 5px padding. That looks okay. I'm going to try this. So white space, do I still need this white space no wrap thing? If I'm floating it, yeah, I do. Okay. So the div needs to have input root class here, or I need to target this input root class, root node styles. I don't think I need this notion of wrapping, yeah, for the smaller inputs, or sorry, for the simple inputs. But yeah, for this one I do. So I'm gonna say here, white space no wrap. So white space no wrap. Hopefully that's a option here. Cool, just works. It's great when things just work. Then I need to apply the actual styles to the icon. So let's do that here. Let's make this look a little bit nicer. So it was float right, and then there's one more thing I needed to do here, which was I needed to say padding right was px4, I believe is what I said. So let's just make sure that compiles. That did compile. Is that not enough space? Yeah, it's a little bit too aggressive. So let's make it, I don't know. Well, let's just do this here. Padding right should be, let's round it up to 10 pixels. Let's do 10 pixels. All right, so now It's staying to the right. Okay. Why did that happen? Hmm. I don't like this. Um, why would that be? Did I apply to the wrong thing? No. Um, something I'm not understanding. So that's something I'm going to tweak later too, I think. But I don't want to fuss over the details. But we're getting pretty close. Um, I think I'm actually going to end it here because, well, I might do a second part. Well, you know what? I think I might actually just continue because um, what I want to do now is move the implementation of the password input, so all this stuff, into its own module so that I can then emit messages and not complicate the design of this. The structure will remain the same, which means that the CSS that we just wrote will all be valid still, even though it needs some refactoring, which I can do later. Um, famous last words. but uh, but yeah, let's do that. So we have this wired up, taking inputs, and it's looking pretty good. So yeah, now I want to make this toggleable. Man, it really bothers me that the border isn't transitioning as it should. The border color isn't transitioning as it should, but okay, whatever. So here we are. We're going to go into input, and I'm going to add a new file inside here called password.elm. So let's change that here. Module. Whoa, what's happening? Module ant.input.password exposing password, and then to HTML. Although maybe. Oh, wait a second. It'd be nice to import ant.input exposing to HTML, because it is just going to be an input, but slightly modified. But I don't think I'll be able to do that. Well, I mean, I'm going to have circular dependencies for starters, so I can't do that because. Wait, am I going to be importing anything, or is input going to be importing anything from password? I actually don't think so. Yeah. So I'm trying to think, like, does that make sense though? Because the icon needs to have an event bound to it. Um, hmm, that's the thing. There's all this all these like APIs that I've already added that would need to be copy pasted. So I need to think about this for a sec. Some time has passed, and I took a break and just needed some time to think. And I went ahead and implemented an API that I'm content with. It's definitely there's definitely room for improvement, but it works, and I think it's good enough. Like, I don't want to obsess about it for now, and I like revisiting designs and you know, coming in with a fresh new perspective in a different day and seeing if something else comes into my mind. But I think for now it works. So yeah, while I was not recording, I went ahead and implemented it, and this is what I ended up with. It's pretty damn good. Um, you know, you can type inputs just like you would. Um, there is a minor distinction, which is I haven't really thought about, like, you know, what happens when you have a custom icon. So this is right now being rendered with a custom icon that turns blue um, in the React example. So right now I'm not really worried about that, but in the future maybe it will do that. Yeah, but for now it's pretty accurate to what we see in the React implementation. Yeah, so what I want to finish up with is to just do a walkthrough of the API itself and the code inside the input module. I don't really want to show the CSS because I don't know. It's just I'm not the most proud of the CSS, but also it's kind of like besides the point. Like, I think most of us kind of can infer what the CSS might be, but the Elm code is what's of interest. So I'm going to do a walkthrough of the example itself, so the actual code for this. So you'll see that there's a with password type function that I was talking about already, but there's some new things. So there's a model that is now being exposed in the input module, and there's also a internal message type, right? Because we were talking about how this input needs to emit messages when you toggle this visibility state, right? So I'll show how that works in a moment. And then when you initialize your model, that's gonna manage or, like, you know, eventually render the input. That model needs to be aware of the visibility state of the password input. So there's also this this value constructor inside of the input module that allows you to specify the visibility state, or like the initial state of visibility. So there's that, and then there's the update function. So this is one of the things that I'm not like the most happy about, but it works so far, which is you have a user supplied type, right? So this is a user supplied type that you supply for the on input like event. So like anytime I type an input on either of these, this message is being invoked or emitted. But then there's this input message type, which is like a type that wraps a internal type, right? So there's an internal input message type, which I'll talk about in a moment. And the idea is that if you want to create a password field, you need to specify this wrapper type, okay? And what that allows us to do is to trigger this event in such a way that it adheres to this type, to your message type. So I'm just converting an internal message into a message that the user controls or is aware of and can make values for. So that's what that's about. And so whenever that message appears with this opaque input message type, we need to call update password input. So I tried to be as clear as possible around these like additional functions that are being exposed, with regard to their like what they're about, right? So these things are all about passwords, right? So hopefully people won't start calling update password input and setting up a update function and stuff when all they want to do is render a simple example such as this one where you don't have a password input and you don't need to manage the state of your input. But yeah, one additional change that I had to do was the toHTML function now has to supply a model. So in the stateful password example here, the model is this password input state. But in the example of here, right, where there's no state at all for this input, there's a custom value or a value of type model, right? So if you go back to here, right? So there's a value of type input model called stateless, and so you would call toHTML with the stateless model, and that would render an input that doesn't require state management. So that's how that's working. Yeah, so that's the example. Now on to a walkthrough of the changes that I made. So if we start from the top of the file, we can see that I've exposed, let's see what's new that I've exposed. Well, yeah, the model and message, and you can create values of input.model, which is fine, but you cannot produce values of message. It's just an opaque type. Then there's the update password input, and then there's the with password type function that we've already discussed. Moving forwards here, we have the model. So like I mentioned, there's two values that can make a model type. There's a stateless, and then there's the password input state value that takes a record with text visible of type Boolean. Let's see what's new. I don't know if I had done this already prior to the previous cut, but I have this tagger, right? This is the thing I was talking about here. So this, we can call this a tagger, or a function that takes a message and returns some other type. So that's what this is doing here. And so the way that's being used is we're storing it in the type field for the input options record. So not too much has changed there. Moving on, we have the input with placeholder with size on input, so nothing new there. Then we have the password input code. Now I chose to have the message live here just to sort of signal that this message is only emitted for passwords so far. And there's only one value constructor, so figured it made sense. Yeah, so then there's the actual modifier to modify the options record given a tagger. So if we go back to the example and we type with password type, there we see that this takes your tagger, then an input, and then returns a new input. Cool. And then there's the update password input. So yeah, so like this is what I start talking about, or this is what I mean when I was initially talking about the implementation not being the best, but it works. It's kind of like cumbersome right now because I have to take care of things like the stateless case of the model, which I mean like ideally I should never need to even think about this, but that was sort of the API that I arrived at. And then I have to do another case for the message itself when you do actually have a stateful input. And then basically what I'm doing here is just toggling the visibility. And with that, that's how we get this inversion of state here. In terms of view code, there's some new functions. So there's the icon rendering logic. Not too much exciting here, but I'm taking an icon from the icon ant.icons module. So ant.icons, there we go. Importing icon. Icon message, there we go. So yeah, I take the tagger and an icon, and then I trigger a message when we click it. There we go. And then that message again is handled by the update function here. So it has to be wired up by a user. But because we're going to be writing a form utility like wrapper for form related things, I think the API will end up being a lot nicer, and people won't really need to do this sort of manual wiring up of things. Should be a lot more intuitive for them. Password input to HTML. So this is just an abstraction for specifically the password input. What I've decided to do in this situation is because you can technically create a password input value but not have like the correct state associated with it. In that case, I'll render a input field or input element with type password, but I won't render an icon, which I think is fine. I think that's like a sensible workaround, because if you don't render the icon, then you can't click on anything and trigger these messages that you can't even handle or deal with. So I thought that was a decent way to deal with things. So like for example, if I go here and I go to let's see, model, so input dot stateless, this is what I mean. So if I go here, it's going to refresh and it's going to remove this icon, but it's still a password icon or password input. And I think that is totally okay with me, and I think it prevents weird states. So I think that's okay. Moving on. So yeah, so we render an icon, and this is again where the toggling occurs, or the UI logic for toggling the icon occurs. So if the visibility is true, then render type text. But if it's not visible, then go back to password field. There's some base attributes that I pass in as well, and then I pass in my custom attribute here for the password, and then there's an optional icon that I render where when it stays stateless again, I just render a empty span. And then besides that, not much else. I mean, yeah, like when you have a basic text input, you render your input with some attributes, you got your classes, that's about it. And then with all that, you get these two awesome looking components. So I hope that this was helpful. If you have any feedback, really appreciate it. Till next time.